All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you, and welcome to the third GIS Advisory Council meeting. We'll get started now. So as before, we're just going to kind of run through just introductory remarks, public comment, meeting administration, just go over the priority topics and like the work group updates. And then we'll start a discussion around the 5-year plan. I don't know if you saw or the email I sent about an hour ago, kind of regarding what I was hoping to kind of accomplish with that. Really, I just kind of want to write down what some of the topics that people really want to dig into on the next one. And on the next meeting, I kind of plan to kind of, unless there's like a big update with any of the work groups or any other topics, that we're probably going to shorten that part of the discussion and talk more about the 5-year plan on the next meeting. But I want to at least start kind of brainstorming some topics this time so that we can kind of like all chew on it in the intervening time in preparation for the next meeting. And then I'll do my usual kind of pregame meeting for in advance of the next advisory council meeting, and we'll kind of have a more structured, better discussion at that time about the 5-year plan. Yeah, and then that'll be it. Hopefully this one will be pretty quick. So I guess we'll start with the introductions. I'll just kind of go down down, and if people can kind of introduce themselves in this order, we'll use that as kind of attendance. So I'm Alfredo Herrera. I'm the GIS Geographic Information Officer for the state of Connecticut. I don't know if Scott is on yet. Yeah, let's skip over Scott. I guess Stuart.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stuart Deland. I'm a GIS administrator for DEEP. My counterpart, who is part of the recently created BIT agency's name, is Bill Toussaint. He can't join us right now because his internet provider kind of just went down, but we are kind of the DEEP side of the GIS stuff. Thank you.
I think, like I said before, Greg is not here because he's flying. Dan?
Hi, I'm Dan Chaya. I'm the GIS coordinator for the Division of Emergency Services and Public Protection for 911.
Gary?
Good afternoon, Gary Archambault, Department of Public Health. I'm the agency data officer as well as a senior epidemiologist.
Eric Snowden?
Hi, I'm Eric Snowden. I'm the IT and GIS manager for the Capital Region Council of Governments.
Mark Hoover?
I'm Mark Hoover. I'm the GIS director for MetroCog.
I guess Thad, you're next.
Hi, Thad Dymkowski, GIS analyst for the town of South Windsor, Connecticut.
John?
Hi, John Guskowski. I'm a planner with Tyche Planning and Policy Group, and here representing CCM.
Emily?
Hi, Emily Wilson, University of Connecticut, CLEAR and Extension.
Peter? Sam Pierre? Peter, you on?
I can't unmute. Now I can unmute. How's that?
Yep, I can hear you now.
All right. Pete Samperi, I'm the GIS operations supervisor at United Illuminating.
Thank you. Meg?
Megan McGaffin, SLR Consulting.
All right. I think that's everybody that's on the council. All right. So, as usual, you know, the legislative basis and all of that kind of fun stuff. We've kind of been over this before. Some of the highlights and important milestones since the last meeting. So first, the MOU with DOT to kind of expedite the work on the administrative boundaries has been executed, and they are started work on that project. I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing there later in the meeting. David will also talk more about the first cut of the broadband availability map based off of the ISP submitted data. I will say we will not be showing the map yet because it is still very much a first cut, but we can talk about kind of some of the ups and downs of how we got there and what to expect coming soon. The other big update is we actually received the service address data from Eversource, and that is the biggest reason why we were able to complete the map for the broadband stuff, to kind of really fill out a lot of the gaps that we're missing between some of the other data sources that we already had on hand. Excuse me. And we have selected a candidate for the GIS analyst position. I am not yet able to announce them because the hiring process is still ongoing. But we hope to be able to announce that soon. And I will likely either send it to the council members just so everybody knows, or post it on the GIS network or something like that if that's something that people are into. So from there, I'm going to open it up for any public comments for a few minutes, and yeah. If you could raise your hand, then I'll call on you to have you speak, and then you can unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead, Margot. You're muted.
Okay, there we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Margot Burns from RiverCog. And I just wanted to quickly make a comment. Kevin Armstrong and I were talking yesterday about the use of our data sets that we got for the 2022 collection. And I've been trying to work with them, and some of them link up easily, and some of them I'm really having to work hard to get them to link. And all right. And so I think I know that I didn't see the letter that you guys sent out last year, or in this year, I guess. So I don't know exactly what you were asking the assessors for, but if you could, is there some way that we can make it so that they have to give us a GIS link between their CAMA data and their GIS data set? An easy link that actually works.
Yeah, I'll reach out after this meeting, and then we can talk about and dig into that further. Okay. We can see what we can do to help you out there.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Kendall, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kendall. I'm from the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection in the Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And I was just wondering, this is my first meeting, so maybe you've already talked about it, so I don't mean to rehash something that's already been talked about, but maybe one of the sub-work groups that we'll talk later. I was just wondering if there was a agency, is there like a list of GIS professionals that would be able to assist the State Emergency Operations Center GeoLab during an emergency? Is that a list that, or has this been spoken about at all in this group?
It has not, but
sorry,
are you talking about? So, are you talking about list of GIS professionals working in state government or anywhere?
Yeah, it's kind of a half-thought idea on my end, but it might have been already thought about on my colleague, either Gemma or Dan. So I don't mean to speak out of turn, but just thinking about staffing up the GeoLab in the State Emergency Operations Center, especially for hurricane season coming up. And so I was just thinking, you know, for like in our world, it would be like an ICS 205 was like a staffing roster for an emergency. Just thinking about the GeoLab and the State Emergency Operations Center of like geo professionals that would come in. I know Eric Lindquist is one that is, and Gemma are like the two that rotate, but just thinking about like broadening that a little, or deepening the bench.
Alfredo, I can jump in on this. Hi there,
Sure.
Kendall. This is Stuart from CT Deep. I know I haven't heard anything recently about it, but in the last groupings of exercises like disaster preparedness, both myself and I don't want to speak for him, but I believe Dan Chaya provided assistance at the Armory for some of those exercises. And I don't know if there are more planned for the future, but that's definitely something I could provide. I could be a part of.
Yep, this is Gemma, and that's correct. You guys have provided tremendous assistance in the past, and I would imagine would continue forward. But just knowing, working with people on a daily or weekly basis, because we know each other and we know the work we do. I mean, it's easy enough to go ahead and call, see who's available, and develop that staffing as needed.
Is that
Yeah.
something this group is thinking about as well, of like extending that pool of available bench kind of, or is that not the appropriate place for this?
No, that's good to discuss. I think as far as the GIS office is concerned, I mean, I think both David and myself are probably willing to kind of help out in a pinch. And then, that's kind of part of our mission is to kind of help out other agencies when needed. An emergency situation obviously would be when needed. But yeah, I mean, I think, depending on what is needed and what the ask is, we would have to kind of weigh that a little bit, but, we can do our best to help out. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I think some of you are probably aware that Brenda Bergeron used to run a group at the Armory, the GIS Data Committee, and I think that was kind of, the GeoLab was sort of rolled into that. I think Mark Getz and I were on there representing the COGS, and there was a fairly large group, I want to say about 8 or 10. But I don't know if Brenda may have some information about, usual suspects for that kind of stuff. I'm not aware that group is still meeting. I know I haven't gotten any notices for a couple of years, but.
No, that's exactly who I was talking to ask this question, was Brenda.
Oh,
So.
okay, great. All right, you're
We're
way
on the
ahead.
same wavelength. So just sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's just information gathering.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we will move on. So we'll talk about the Advisory Council Administration for a sec. I don't have any specific topics to talk about unless there's something that anyone wants to bring up that we need to do as a council, kind of administratively. If not, we'll just kind of keep moving. All right, cool. All right, now into GIS priority topics. So, this is just the rundown of the work groups and other priority topics that the GIS office has. And we'll just kind of run down and give updates on each one as they come down. So aerial imagery acquisition will be up first, I think. So I'll start, and then Erickson can chime in as needed, since I think Eric Lindquist is going to be late. First and foremost, we selected Eric Lindquist to be the project manager at OPM to kind of oversee this project and the acquisition of it. He is currently writing the RFP into the OPM boilerplate and getting the process started so that we can have that out soon. My guess is somewhere in it's looking like mid to late September at this point, but we're, the ball's rolling and we're moving. I think we're still okay on the timeline. Even if we are a little bit behind, we should still be okay, kind of to have something situated by the end of the year. And, as we're still writing, we're still kind of refining some of the requirements for the flights and the what's it called, the deliverables that we're asking for within there. Is there anything else, Eric, that you think I didn't cover that needs to be said?
I think you pretty much covered it. I mean, I was just going to say, we've, defined preliminary specs for the deliverables, and you know, the project lead has obviously been identified. I think we're in good hands with Eric, and you know, like you said, the RFP document is being OPM-ified, as it were, and the schedule looks like it's going to be adjusted quite a bit. That at least that's the gist that I got from the last meeting. It sounds like just the publishing of the RFP to the public is going to be a little later than we expected. It sounds like OPM, their review process is going to take a little longer. But like you said, I mean, we did get started pretty early, so I think we had built in, you know, a little bit of room. So as long as we stay on that schedule, we should be pretty good. I mean, we just don't want to risk having planes spoken for, you know, before we're under contract for this spring. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
All right, cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it on the aerial imagery. Next is Geospatial Clearinghouse, and I'll let Emily give that update.
Hi, thanks. Our group has been working this summer. I mentioned at our last meeting, we divided up all of our states and some large cities and counties and have visited the clearinghouse sites, although they're called all different things. I just use that as a generic term of all of these different places. And we have a nice ranking and spreadsheet where we've looked at everything from data platforms and data formats to ways to preview data or viewers, help, accessibility, ease of use, data organization, and all sorts of things. So we have nearly finished that. And then we've had a couple of meetings where we've discussed these topics, like what we really liked sharing. I like this about this data, I like this about that state. And while I was feverishly taking notes. So our next step is to start to put that into a document that will be, we will continue to grow so that we have some guidance and things we really liked based on what others have done. And then we also have some new ideas. One was a place where people can contribute methods and how to do certain things, like commons, things that we need to do across the state, like a wiki site, I think was the thought. So some new ideas of things that we could work towards, as well as the best way to integrate all of these different desires into one thing. So we're definitely working, and it's definitely a work in progress. Feel free to weigh in if I missed anything, those of you who have been working together here.
I think that pretty much covers it from what I've been to. I mean, yeah, like you said, we're pretty much at the stage where we're synthesizing everything that we've looked at, and we're coming up with a lot of really good ideas, and we've seen a lot of interesting things. So I think we're in kind of good shape, and you know, we'll very soon start kind of putting something together on both the work group side and also on the GIS office side to actually start standing up like a first cut of the open data site and the GIS clearinghouse, or I should say not the open data site, the GIS clearinghouse, so that we can then have something to input all of those recommendations into. Yeah, so before we moved on to the next topic, I just want to acknowledge that Scott Gall has jumped on the call, and as also Eric Lindquist. All right.
Hi, guys.
All right, so next topic is statewide addressing and geocoding. So this one we have been working somewhat feverishly in the back end, even though the working group hasn't quite officially met, just because there's a lot of moving internal to state government pieces that I wanted to sort out before we kind of started widening the group for input. So the biggest thing is we've identified a lot of the issues with the layers, thanks to, in no small part to David's efforts to kind of really figure out how to kind of carve a path forward. One of the biggest kind of wins on this front is we did get the Eversource data to fill in a whole mess of gaps of things that were just, you know, missing from just a lack of data submissions from the localities as to what changed, what's new, that kind of thing. It's just one of those things that because we don't have a process in place, it was hard to update. So one of the solutions was to find a data set that could kind of in one fell swoop fill in a lot of those gaps. And thankfully that Eversource data was very much that kind of data set. Because of that, we were able to kind of really expedite the completion of the broadband availability map, but then also kind of thinking longer term, that kind of opens us up to kind of stronger collaboration with both DESPI and DOT on kind of how to maintain that so that we don't kind of wind up in the same place where we just like don't have changes. So there has been some discussion about how to kind of set up a process or integrate into an existing process so that we can turn that pull of information, of address information from the localities into a push to us of that information, looking at various different platforms so that to kind of lower the barrier of entry and make it easier for all of those localities to submit the data so that we don't kind of significantly increase the burden of what they have to do. We're trying to be as flexible as possible and then built in both automation workflows and manual workflows on our end to kind of take that information in and be able to kind of keep up with it and all of the changes that happen over time. So like I said, a lot of that has been, we've kicked off those discussions. We had a big meeting over at DOT with Dan Jaya and myself and the team over there about kind of what some of the things that we could do. So we're pretty much at a point where we're going to, actively start improving the address point layer and then be able to kind of create derivatives for both economic development and public safety to kind of use as an improved data set to kind of do whatever activities they need to do, and then eventually publish a geocoder that anyone can use. Thad, what's up?
Alfredo, in your conversations with regards to looking at the data and massaging the data, was there any reference or nod made towards the Fed next gen requirements for next generation 911?
So the conversations that we're having are much more kind of procedural as far as how we get the data and how we kind of take it in and process it, rather than the actual format of the data itself. We need to solve those more fundamental problems of how do we get the changes reported to us so that we can make changes to the data. We are looking to use the next gen standard or a variation thereof so that it's compatible. We definitely don't want to kind of do something that's going to require more work in the back end to report up basically uphill, so to speak. So whatever we do, it'll definitely be kind of either compliant or adjustable to that. But right now, the problem we're trying to solve is much more fundamental of how do we even get the data and how do we kind of set up a process and a workflow that enables us to keep up to date without kind of losing track of, the changes that have occurred over time. And then, so that's pretty much the statewide addressing and geocoding update. So the next one is broadband mapping, and I will let David talk on that one.
How's it going? So as Alfredo alluded to, one of our biggest problems in processing ISP submissions was that their addresses didn't match anything. Some of their addresses were made up and not real too, so we had two sets of data that were incomplete or partially fabricated. Using the Eversource and UI data, we did sort of like a recurring geocoding that got everything in the same format. We eliminated all units, so all multi-dwelling units are a single premise point on the existing map, and then we will, as parcel data is completed, because we're still waiting on a few little submissions, but we will then use that to add in and multiply units so that the units will be stacked on top of each other, and we can use that for any sort of calculations required. So we added about 300,000 unique premise points in that process, which got us to where there are no addresses that are not matching unless they simply do not exist. So that's pretty good. We're there, and we should be able to have something we can take back to ISPs by the end middle of next month, and use that as a secondary verification process. Find some of the problem areas. Some of the ISP's data quality was pretty bad when they submitted it to us, so that's left a lot of unserved addresses that we can pretty safely assume are served because they're 15 feet away from a served address, et cetera. So we'll go through some additional validation processes, and then we'll be able to have that up and available for everyone's use. Any questions on broadband things?
Can you talk a little bit about the surveys, both the one on the broadband hub and the CCM one, please?
Sure. So we do have a report your address unserved function on the broadband mapping hub, which I guarantee all of the members of this community have not even been on because we have that few views. But do visit broadbandmaps.ct.gov. There are useful things, and if there's things you would like to see there, let me know, and I'd be happy to add them. We do have, 20 reports of addresses on there. We also cooperated with CCM in putting out a survey that has now about 2,200 responses. About 150 of those are invalid, but I've started processing that data. We've got some challenge points for FCC processing, so that'll be good. And that data will be shared publicly once CCM has announced it to their own members. As they funded the survey, I don't want to, one-up them and do it myself. But I will be processing that data and making all of a number of products related to it available on the Broadband Mapping Hub as well. Thanks, Thad.
All right. If that's all for the broadband mapping, the next up is the CAMA working group and the parcel data collection. Eric, would you mind giving that update, please?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so things are pretty quiet right now at this time of year for the CAMA working group. Really, it's just a matter of us taking a look, going through file by file what was received. I know David Lukens has been helping out with that now most recently, so thank you, David. Keeping a log of issues that we discover so that when we reconvene this fall, we can have a fresh list of things to address in front of us based on what was discovered in the last submission, which is this year's submission. So we're probably going to plan to reconvene on probably a biweekly basis, starting after the vacation season ends. So coming up in another month or two, we'll get that group restarted in preparation for the next round of CAMA and parcel data collection in 2023. Hopefully, again, working with the vendors, the CAMA vendors, and GIS consultants and the town assessors and GIS staff, depending, it varies town by town, but obviously, but working with those, cohorts of people to work toward improving the standard for the next round. And then, of course, trying to connect that to the work that's being done in Thad's group with developing the GIS, that sort of framework for parcel digitization, sort of the update to what was our old parcel drafting standard. So, so still a lot of work to be done, and looking forward to, another round of working through issues as they're discovered, and hopefully each successive year of data collection yields better and better results.
Sounds good, thanks. So I guess the next update is the parcel drafting standards, unless someone has a question about the CAMA stuff. All right, go ahead, Ted.
So the parcel data drafting standards working group has met a few times now. I think it's safe to say we're knee deep into discussing and documenting the process of the parcel data creation. We've had a few great meetings with a lot of really content-rich discussion, and I think the ultimate resulting document is really going to be something that the community at large will find valuable and useful, and it'll help push us a little bit closer to what we're all hoping for, which is that standardized data set for parcels, at least with regards to the construction process and the geometry. So we'll continue to meet. As I said, we're only about knee deep in the document at this point. There's still a lot of information to be discussed and a lot of content to be written and contributed, but we're going along quite well. And I'm feeling, and I think the rest of the group as well, is feeling really confident about our progress and our target for success.
All right, sounds great. Thanks. Anybody have any questions on this topic? All right, so the last few updates, once again, first thing is GIS office hiring. Like I said, we have selected a candidate for the GIS analyst, but the process with HR is still ongoing, so I cannot yet make an announcement. We will be hiring soon thereafter for a more senior coordinator position. And then there is also the possibility of some more grant-funded temporary positions for analysts coming down the road, but those will kind of come up and be posted as the situation arises. The next thing as well is the administrative boundaries update. Just like I said before, that is a project that DOT was already kind of taking underway to improve all of basically the cartographic representation of all of the administrative boundaries throughout the state. But we're also going to kind of add in the other boundaries that are driven by those municipal boundaries as attributes, so that we can do dissolves and basically update all of those boundaries as the municipal boundaries get updated over time, so that those other boundaries never come out of sync. So like I said, the GIS office has completed an MOU with DOT to kind of provide some funding to expedite the completion of this project, so that we can get that updated. And then my plan is to replace the old deep town boundary layer in as many places as possible, both up and down the hierarchical organization chart of government, if you will. So, you know, share it with the Census Bureau and any other federal organizations that will take it. And then also encourage any and all municipalities and COGs to use the updated data set, as well as replacing it in all of the state-run open data sites. So that way we can kind of move forward on a level, kind of on a new level base, and then just improve from there. And then the last update is the ARPA funding allocated to the GIS office by the legislature has finally been secured, and we got approval to start using that money. So, you know, what that means is we can now officially purchase the aerial imagery and some of the other projects that are going to come along with that, which I will talk more about later down the road. I think that's it. And then I think now we can kind of just talk about, unless anybody has any questions on any of the updates, if we want to talk about the 5-year plan topics for kind of further discussion, you know, any kinds of things that we want. So I guess kind of like what I explained in the email before was, like, I really want to get a list of topics and things that people have an appetite for tackling or would like to see kind of addressed within the next 5 years, both by the council and the GIS office and the GIS community at large, so that we can kind of come up with a 5-year plan, if you will, of how we're going to actually get there. So I think for this meeting, what I would like to do is just start talking about some of those topics and what they are, just kind of compile a list, and then at the next meeting, we really kind of dig into some of the key ones that people are, seem to feel really passionate about and want to actually kind of try and synthesize into some sort of a 5-year plan. So who wants to go first? Oh man, that's tough. I think Meg just edged it out.
I'm a little faster on the draw. Thanks. Yeah, so as you may know, I always have a bazillion ideas. So we were talking in our parcels group meeting yesterday, and I know we've talked about this on the GIS Council, is the need to, and it kind of relates to what the earlier speaker, Kendall, had mentioned about knowing who GIS professionals are, maybe creating some sort of directory or listing or active directory of GIS professionals in the state, at any, anybody who's in the industry that may, just as a who's who. State of New York does that. I believe they kept some sort of list. And then the other thing that I think would be interesting to have in a 5-year plan is a method for folks like me who develop data that could be passed up to the state. I had an intern recently, and the intern needed a task, and I said, hey, why don't you take this data I got and map out all the town halls in Connecticut? So now I have this point layer. Who wants it? It doesn't need to stay on my server. So you just that kind of mechanism too for submitting data that could be vetted and then deemed publishable.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, thank you. So Ed, go ahead, and then John.
Sure. Thank you, Alfredo. So one of the topics that has kind of continued to float in the back of my head, I know we have several working groups that are all working on various standards for data creation and those kinds of things and data maintenance. But what I'd love to see the advisory council do is perhaps put together a working group or discuss amongst ourselves to look at the idea of governance, GIS data governance, and not so much as a hard and fast rule, but rather maybe a list of suggestions and recommendations for towns similar in the nature to what the working groups are currently working on for data creation, but just something that can provide towns with some governance on perhaps the best method of how to set up their data, how to set up their rules, how to share those kinds of things, and just general governance guidelines that could be used as a best practices guide similar to what we're working on.
All right. Thank you. Sounds good. Go ahead, John.
So I think this is looking down the road a little bit, maybe in the second half of a 5-year plan, is coming up with a strategy to do a concerted effort to reach out to partner organizations, partner users, even beyond the, sort of the all-star team that's on this Zoom call of sort of GIS power users, talking about finding ways to do outreach to the general public and the various constituencies of current or ideally potential users, to let people know that this data is out there, that it's available, that it is useful, that it could be augmented, that it's multifunctional, and just make the general public and constituent groups aware of what we're doing to sort of make sure that this data is useful and is used, and we build ongoing support for the project. So sort of a public facing element of this.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that is definitely something that's been on my mind. I've had some initial conversations and a lot of thought on this, and yeah, I think this warrants more discussion with this group and also with some of the other constituents at large. Maybe we reach out to some of the folks at CCM, maybe reach out to some of the the folks with the cogs and things like that to kind of just to kind of, flesh out what that would, what that would look like, what that would mean, like what kinds of things are we wanting to see, and how some of these communities, both public and private, want help from the state, if they want help from the state. Yeah, I definitely like this one. I think it just warrants greater discussion to kind of really flesh out what it's going to look like, because it could be a minefield, but it could also be something really great. I see Jenny had GIS Day presentations. I think those just maybe commenting on these topics would make great GIS Day presentations, or at the GIS Network quarterly meetings. Anyone else have any topics?
I have another one too that I was thinking of while we were talking is and I think I mentioned this once before. We used to have 211 involved on the Aero board when he worked for United Way. 211, he was represented on these meetings. I know that 211 has a wealth of data, but I also know simply just from using it and getting it that it needs, there's elements of it that need work. I think that they would be a great resource if we could get in with that organization, somebody there to realize, you know, what data sources are out there. And then for us, especially also too, for the emergency management folks here, 211 is a great resource that people use before they have an emergency. And it would, I think that there could be a lot of cross-referencing that would be beneficial to both types of response. As well as addressing. I think that they could, because they do a ton of geocoding. And I don't think that they have, I don't know what they use for a geocoder, but they could probably provide some input.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's something that I've kind of had to deal with before when I was in New Haven and talking to kind of United Way and then their 211 system. The one they built one specifically for New Haven, but I'm sure they have ones for other regions. So yeah, that is a very useful resource. However, it does come with some data challenges as far as open data standards are concerned. So that is something that we would just have to work through with them. And but yeah, it definitely works for the discussion for sure. David had a good suggestion on municipal cooperation with the geocoder and other data sets. It kind of goes along with the how to submit data to the state. I think that's going to be part of the GIS data clearinghouse, but I think that's something that we should probably also talk about much more specifically to kind of make sure that we that it's not just the private sector that has a way of submitting data to the state, but also municipalities and regions. Basically anybody that generates data, kind of roll it up to us, and then we can do our best to kind of syndicate it on forward to the state or anyone to the feds or anyone else. So just kind of creating a culture of sharing and data interchange within the state, I think is going to be kind of key there. Anything else? Maybe from some of the folks we haven't heard about, Stuart, Peter, Gary.
I do. All right. So I told you I have tons of ideas. So I have one. I have another one.
Hang on, Meg.
If it's okay. Yeah, no, I'll wait.
Let's let Peter go first, and then Scott.
Sure.
No, I'm all set.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say something.
No.
All right, cool. Scott, go ahead.
I was just going to ask for the folks that are on this group who fought kind of long and hard for getting a GIS office, with the opportunity of having a 5-year plan to get kind of your current thoughts or what folks had been thinking during that long process about, how the office and the staffing for it sits in state government. Like, what's the staffing model for it? How does it work with other executive branch agencies? How does it work with the towns, the cogs? Like this, we've got the footprint, we've got GIO, we've got some staff footprint put in place. But like, when you're thinking over the course of 5 years, how do you want that office to evolve and work with the different constituencies here? And all these ideas are great ideas, but they do require people to execute on them. And so trying to get the advisory council to think, through what are the things that we need to get done and what are the resources that we need to accomplish those, and how do we make sure that those are in place? That's a critical role for this group.
I think to kind of not completely answer that, but answer that in part, Scott, is I think the conclusion of some of the groups that we're split into currently in the GIS Council are going to not dictate, but kind of steer the way the office, not only the office, but the council handles itself going into the future. For example, with the aerial imagery, we're trying to figure out, 2023, 2026 flights. So that in itself and the pitfalls that are coming up in terms of figuring out those flights are largely going to kind of determine the focus, or at least I would assume it would determine the focus of the office going into the future. The same thing with the clearinghouse, when that website goes live, with as much thought as we've put into it so far, there's inevitably going to be a massive amount, or I would expect there'd be a massive amount of public opinion that comes from the launch of that website, and that's likely going to be to change the face and the back end of it based on our trying and OPM's trying to cater to those suggestions. So I think that's kind of a response to that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Meg, did you still want to make a comment, or did you want to pass it on to?
No, I don't want to change your comment. I don't want to address the topic I was going to bring up, but I do notice in terms of what Scott brought up, I see you furiously taking notes. I know that one of our recommendations when we made the pitch for this position was to have administrative help with the administrative side of running all of these things. That may serve also to help with, the public outreach side of it and things like that. So I just want to reiterate that when we talked about this, I think we were all hoping that you would have administrative support for this position. I don't know if you do, but your note taking seems very sincere.
Yeah. I don't remember who was first, whether it was Mark or John. Take your pick.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right, I guess I'll go. I mean, just the obvious thing. I'm sure that the aerial image group is kind of working on, but just some kind of sustainable funding for. I mean, we got the flight for 2023 and 2026, but just moving forward, something that we can kind of depend on instead of just having the ARPA money now.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So just in response to Scott's question, I think it's a really good one. And my sense is at this point we need to sort of see how things unfold. I think the location of the department and the structure inside OPM, I think, was probably the most reasonable approach. But as we were thinking about this, at least one of my concerns was how do we place this position in such a way that it encourages or somehow I don't know if it requires is the right word, but facilitates the greatest amount of participation across the different state agencies and across the other stakeholders, utilities and cogs and municipalities. So the hope is that all of the partners, all of the data generators and providers will be cooperative and will be forthcoming. I think we'll sort of have to see after sort of this initial burst of activity what the cooperation looks like, and if there is some kind of internal beef between different state agencies and stuff like that. But I don't anticipate that, but I think we'll have to kind of see how it goes, really. So, but that's, you know, to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I think Thad was next, and then Eric.
So yeah, so not to reiterate what everyone has already said, but just to pretty much support that and answer to Scott, the point that you brought up. I think that over the years that those of us who've been fighting so hard for this position, the things that we've really wanted to see come out of all of this and come out of the legislature and come out of the office creation and the position as well, can probably be boiled down to a few things. Obviously, one of them being data. That there are communities who are very data rich, but there are also communities that are very data poor, for lack of a better phrase of putting it. The haves and the have-nots, if you will. So data being a big one, and then along with that, the data standard, so that when you do have organizations who try and use this data, there is a level of commonality, being able to join and use the data in a way, and thus tied also directly to the data governance I brought up earlier. Obviously, John, as you brought up, funding is a big thing. Again, making sure that we have money to go through these projects, such as the data acquisition for aerial flights and possibly others in the future. And then collaboration, right? Talking about having this index, if you will, of folks who are not only the GIS superstars on this call, but also the folks who may be toiling away in offices of their own, or in silos or in other scenarios, and just being able to bring all those things together. I mean, I really think that kind of collects the ideas and the ideologies that many of us were fighting for many, many years, and we're hoping that this office ultimately would help produce. Now that said, obviously we're not expecting tomorrow to turn key and drive. We recognize that we're building the car while we're driving it, so to speak, and still trying to figure out. And I think we're all kind of well aware of the task that Alfredo has on his very capable hands, but nonetheless an incredibly sizable task. And being here to support him is one thing, but I think patience, prudence, and perseverance really is the tone of the conversation.
That's good. Thanks. Eric, go ahead.
I just want to add a +1 to Mark's comment about predictable funding for future flights. I mean, I've been involved in quite a few of them, even peripherally back in the 2000/2004 one, and at every one, it's always said, this is the last time it's going to be a cobble together funding and get it done. It's like, by next time, we're going to have something in place. Now, this time we have we're out to, probably data delivery in 2027 for the second flight. So we have even more time this time. And, I know a lot of it has to do with legislative and political appetite for things like this. Let's hope that appetite continues. But I just can't underscore it enough that, I know Mark and anyone else who works at a COG realizes that, budget time comes around for a municipality and they want to know if they should try and do a flight of their own, or whether they can expect one coming next year, or can they wait 2 years, or, and sometimes the towns are not even aware at all. So, I mean, that, that there is one. So, I just wanted to underscore that again. And I don't think we should be fooled by having 2 flights planned, as that the predictable funding needs to be part of this process right now, I would say. I'll try and push that forward, as the the head of the aerial committee. The other thing too, on John's point, with the kind of gauging the public reaction to some of these data initiatives and stuff. I mean, a lot of times I'm the one who complains about data collection because of the amount of towns in my COG. I found that this last go around with the parcel collection was, I think the climate with municipalities is in many cases improving. Their willingness to cooperate and realizing that it's actually a small effort to have a good, to have a really good product in the end, and helps all kinds of things in the state. There's still a lot of work to do, but I do find that that's, I'm looking at David right now with 169 towns to collect broadband data from. It's it's a heck of a task. And just one addition to that, we collect a lot of data in the COGS. If we can, either through this committee or, and maybe we can disseminate it to others, knowing when and who is going to be collecting different data sets so that those efforts can be combined. I'm sure Thad, as working in a municipality, it's kind of a bummer to package data for the state and then have the COG call 2 weeks later, or someone else in a different department's calling for a similar data set, where a lot of it could have just been done in one collection effort. But
sure,
like I said, Eric, and with that parcel collection just keeps improving every year, and this year was a big leap forward, and looks like we'll probably be having the same next year. So thanks.
Yeah, no, that's good. Gemma, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So just in response to what has just been mentioned about funding and looking for funding for flights, I don't know if there's ever been a consideration, but the option might be out there for repeatedly applying for one of the FEMA annual grants for mitigation. They have both for FMA, which would be specifically that's funded by the flood mitigation assistance, and that's funded specifically to alleviate any sort of flooding, obviously, and damage to coastal properties. But that would apply to riverine and coastal flights, also brick grants. That would apply to any sort of mitigation, and obviously one of the stalwarts of a good mitigation grant being written is a BCA, which would be basically a benefit cost analysis, where you have to show why your project will actually save money in the end than doing nothing. And some of the data that they're looking for are before and after sort of images. And so any good project obviously has many different aspects to it, that you can highlight. And so while you may need aerial imagery for a vast amount of other things that have nothing to do with flood mitigation or hazard mitigation or anything like that, you can still make the argument for these aerial imageries being used for that. And so they could be, it's a possibility that you could get, I know these grants are typically 75-25, but with 75% covered in these costs, and that would then apply to any municipality or COG could go ahead and then use this aerial imagery to support their grants. So it would really be a kind of collective statewide effort to support every single potential mitigation project that could be put forth in one of these annual grants. And like I said, annual, it means while you have to do it every year, there is for the projected future, there is money available every single year for this. And I think just recently the Biden administration increased the funding for both of these programs by millions. So there's money there. It's just a thought consideration one might want to look at for an avenue of potential long-term funding for these.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's great. That is definitely, I think, that has been on my mind, and I know many of you that I've talked to about this topic know that that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this, in particular with the ARPA funding, is like we're trying to turn this windfall and prove its value so that we can turn it into a program. So I think that's really kind of, in my mind, that's going to be kind of like once we get this and get this past this initial hurdle of like procuring this first flight in the contract for both flights and all of that stuff, I think that's really going to be where the meat of the work of the work group for the aerial imagery acquisition group is going to be, in like figuring out, okay, now that we've done this, now that we've secured this, use this windfall to get this, how do we leverage that windfall into a program? to find all of the various different funding sources and basically convince people to give us money to make sure that this continues. That's great. David, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of a common thread here with all of these things in terms of the 5-year plan is sort of proving usefulness and, you know, finding a way to engage with stakeholders, whether they're in the GIS community or out. And I think one of the things that, at least I'm not in the working groups and stuff, but one of the things we don't necessarily have a list of is like, what are the most useful products we could possibly be producing as a state, as municipalities? How can we cooperate on those? And so in terms of our master address layer, you know, what can we put into that schema as we build it out that will allow for as many uses as possible, the best economic development analysis, the best, you know, security analysis, whatever somebody might need that for, and engaging stakeholders in those industries as part of that process, because that will prove the utility of all of this investment more than anything else. And so I think there's a real necessity to center those products and contact industries that are outside of GIS, but will use that GIS data in new ways. So I think putting something together where, you know, when someone at the municipal level runs into something, we would really like to be able to do this analysis, but we don't have that in our data. Having that posted somewhere so that we can then figure out how we can put that into state level data and vice versa would be a really helpful step for making sure that we are always useful.
Oh, thanks. That's great. Meg, go ahead.
I agree with everything that David said, and to reiterate what Gemma was saying, which I think is a brilliant idea. It might be, I don't know if anybody on this council also works on the state hazard mitigation plan or the state's plan of conservation and development, but those might be good avenues in where to kind of develop the to insert getting a state aerial photo as a hazard mitigation or exercise product might be at least, I don't know when the next one's being done, hazard mitigation plan or POCD, but it's always helpful to identify potential projects in those plans to facilitate funding. So I think that would be, I think that's a brilliant idea for Gemma to bring up, and that would probably be at least an immediate avenue in which we could start pursuing the idea.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. All right, this has been really good. Anybody else have any input or things they want to talk about? Scott, go ahead.
Real quickly, this is Gemma, just with regards to
sorry.
what Meg said. I think that if Kendall is still on, Kendall could probably tell you when the next update for the new state hazard mitigation plan is, but that's on a 5-year cycle. And you are absolutely correct. If you actually do a broad statement in that plan, rather than pinpointing a specific project, but, you know, rather than saying, I want to do this to this place, you want to say, I want to do when funding is available to, you know, areas that would be impacted in this nature, then basically it doesn't matter kind of where it happens, but it's eligible. And you can also then that's just yet one more tool that you could use, which is say we already have it written in the plan. And that is also something that would support funding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hazard mitigation, state hazard mitigation plan 2023 update is they currently have received the bid for who will do that this year. Yes. Thank you, Gemma.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to add, there were a couple comments about public outreach, which I think is really important and probably like under the state does not have the best means to deliver on public outreach, but for the particularly again looking to the members of the advisory council to sort of help lighten the load on this. Like for those of you that are the reps for CCM, for the COGS, for who have connections to those communities, if you think let's make sure we get the word out, please bring invite Alfredo to one of the meetings or bring folks to one of the those so we can both hear the things that are needs at the municipal level or from nonprofits or private sector. Their so that the GIS office is kind of hearing those and that we're getting the word out that way. Public outreach is not the state's strong suit. It's under-resourced. For Megan's point, we've got some resources for administrative support, but it's never enough. But we really need the help of the members on the council to kind of get the word out. So if you're in one of those communities, you've got a thought about it, please, suggest ways in which we could start doing that. That'd be great. David brought up the broadband survey earlier, getting the word out about those things. We don't have an email list. Like, we just can't do these things on our own. So I think that your help is really welcome there. Emily has an analog hand raised. Sorry.
Sorry, I can't find the button, so old fashioned here. Talking about a new fashioned thing, and Alfredo and I have talked about this a little bit, like and we're not sure how it fits with an OPM, but some sort of blog, newsletter, something that's light lifting, short blurbs that can be shared, tweeted, passed along in an email to somebody. Like, there's a lot of great work going on, and I think most people don't know about it yet. And it is an effort. So if we set up some way to do that, maybe various people could contribute to a blog thing with updates, but the ability to share things around digitally, I think, is critical to let people know what we're doing, and even share like great stories, like towns that are, had some success with something. So we've been talking a little bit about how to do that, but I think that's a really important part of the public outreach, to let people know all the great stuff we're working on.
Yeah.
Newsletters.
Oh.
The newsletter was fun for the council, or the GIS network, but it was a lot. It was a big lift. Yeah, but that was
that's
fun.
what I was thinking. We were talking about like a blog where it could be really short, one thing. It doesn't have to be a whole spread or something that's easy, but shareable.
Yeah. Like Emily said, that's something that we kind of tossed around the idea of. I'm still trying to figure out how we would do that. I don't know if we would do it under the auspices of OPM, if we even have such a mechanism for doing that sort of thing, or if we do it under the auspices of the GIS network, like on that website, maybe there's like a way to kind of do a blog on there, and I could just, run with it and just put stuff up that the GIS office is doing and try and get that to be a little bit more active and just engage with the community more, both the GIS professional community and also the non-GIS community, just because, there's a lot that they can contribute to us and vice versa. And they may not just realize it because they think it's too hard or something. That's kind of that's a thing that's always happening. No, this is all really great stuff. Anything else? All right, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I'm going to open it up one more time for any kind of public comment, just to see if anybody got in the audience, as it were, have anything that they want to ask about what we've discussed, and then I think that'll be it. All right, sounds good. Well, I guess we'll finish up a little bit early and give you guys some time back in your day. And I'd like to thank you all for the frankly fantastic discussion on all of this stuff, especially for the 5-year plan topics. I will kind of take all of these notes, internalize them, kind of come up with some things, and I will likely be talking to all of you about these things before the next meeting. And then before the next meeting, we'll be back to our usually scheduled programming of doing a pregame kind of chat with all the council members before we have the meeting. So I think we're good. And thank you so much, all of you, for attending, all of the council members for attending, and all of the members at large for attending. Have a good day.
Thanks, Alfredo.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.